Yay.
Mom, I'm so glad you were willing to do this. I feel like this is going to be really helpful for people, especially like grown-ups who are navigating being grown-ups in the life of little fat kids who, for whom, I don't know, something I've noticed a lot from the stories you've told me of raising me is how much fat phobia you encountered because of people's experience of me being fat and like what you had to deal with. And so I'm excited and grateful that you're willing to talk about this stuff so that we can kind of normalize the struggle. I don't know. I don't want to normalize this because it's wrong, but like, I also want to just highlight this kind of aspect of raising a kid. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what's really interesting too, is I just want to start with this just because I was a curiosity I had in the last couple of days, mostly because there's this random woman on one of the Real Housewives franchises, Dorit, who is from Connecticut, but her accent sounds like she's from somewhere between Australia, England, and like, I don't know, Britain. I don't know, something like that, right? She has this weird accent that she just kind of created. But you are from Canada and you don't have an accent. You don't even say a boot or sorry. You are like so neutral. And I was curious how you kind of removed your accent and assimilated, I guess, is really what you did. So will you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. When I came out to California, when we moved from Eastern Canada to California, I was almost 10 years old. So I just the beginnings of middle school, and so you have enough stuff anyway, and there was quite a bit of culture shock. So like if any adult entered in the room, I was taught to get up and you stand by your seat. And so you can think in Southern California and I'm get up and I stand by my seat and everybody just looks at me. And so there's, things like that. So there's
you were in the classroom and an adult would walk in and you would stand up by your seat and all the other California kids are just sitting there like impolite non-Canadians.
Right. Well, they just, it isn't something that they phase. They don't, I was taught you stand up and you're polite and you greet, you see the newcomer, you recognize the adult in there. So it was, there was a lot of, and I also came from parochial school in Canada. So that even was more where they had corporal punishment, which I never experienced, but my older sister did.
Which one, Sherry?
Oh, yeah. Valerie, you just look at her and she'd cry. So yeah, she's still crying. But they had corporal punishment and you knew it. And those nuns were merciless, but and they were nuns in the full habit and everything. So it was quite a culture shock. And I was teased a bit, teased about saying a boot and other things. And so I worked on rounding my vowels and assimilating, because the last thing you want when you're 10, 11, and 12 is to be different. So that's my story.
Wow. It's really interesting because like nowadays, I think with the internet and kids having access to the internet, if they want to change their accent, it's a little bit easier to just get access to the resources to work on that. But you kind of just figured it out by just paying attention to the people around you and conforming, which, I mean, this is something I teach on all the time, but basically we're humans, so we have an inherent need for belonging, but we live in a society that really holds hostage our belonging for our conformity. And that is just a great example of something that a lot of kids end up doing to just be safe and try to stay safe. And also, I just want to reflect how horrifying it is to me that women of God, like nuns who are supposed to be sharing the love of God, were doing it and probably still do it in some places in such a violent way with children, which is just, I think, the opposite of God.
Yeah.
And probably pushes more people away from faith than who could be brought in by it. And that's a shame.
Yeah, I think, well, it was that time period too, where it was quite normal for parents to spank their children. I mean, if you didn't spank your children, then you were one of those permissive parents and your kids were unruly and they were not mannered and they were to be shamed and they were, everything built upon itself. It was the way of conforming people to think, the generation prior to me, to think this is how things should run.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, all adults, and meanwhile, while they're smoking their 2 and 3 packs of cigarettes and giving each other cartons for gifts and all of that stuff, that was in that wonderful aware time period. And, that they adored these celebrities that were womanizers and even presidents that were womanizers. So that was that time period.
Ugh, wild. And this is just to give people context. You immigrated in 1962.
Right.
So this is like all happening in that era. And it's interesting because like I try not to look back with a ton of judgment, because I know judgment is just a feedback loop that hurts me, because everyone is always doing the best they can with what they have. But when it's so interesting because now like nonviolent parenting is a way of bringing kids up who have an awareness of people around them, and in fact possibly have more manners than just like complacent kids who have like no personality and are like scared to do anything. But like there's a way of teaching kids how to like be mindful of people around them in the world, and less like, I think it almost creates like that rugged individualism that we're dealing with now in the pandemic, where people are so focused on themselves and what do I want, what's my freedom, because they're taught to constantly be afraid of this like external world because of all the punishment they're taught, right? Rather than learning how to just show up in the world as themselves.
I don't know if I agree with that, but
we can disagree. That makes for a better podcast.
Yeah. Because I think the people who are making those kind of movement, I think my age is less influential now than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So the ones that are creating, the anti-vaxxers and I don't trust anybody and all of that, that is a different mindset. I actually think, we've had a discussion about homeschooling, and we could talk a while about homeschooling, because I think there's an importance for people to have the socialization, especially diversity socialization. And the problem with homeschooling is that you do not get that diversity training or socialization in most homeschooling situations.
Well, if you don't get it at home, you got to figure out how to get your kids in that too. And there's other ways of doing that.
But it's really hard to see outside your fishbowl. And that has been a big issue with isms everywhere. Everybody thinks their ism is the normal. And so it's really hard to create, and that's one of the reasons I am a proponent for public school. I don't necessarily care how it's structured, but because you get the opportunity to mix with people outside of your reality.
Totally. I think that's a total benefit of school, especially if school is done in a way that like allows for, I don't know, actual diversity and not just,
non-tracking
racism under the rug.
Non-tracking and mixed abilities. And that's, I did have the opportunity to go to schools that valued that and teach at schools that valued that. Did they value it 100%? No. Did they still do some other institutional stuff going on? Yes. So I ended up, I worked with the tough kids that just all happened magically to fall into my classroom, even though it was supposed to be an anti-track school, but that at least in my classroom, I valued everybody and tried to do the best I could. So, but there's many different methods. There's all these different philosophies in teaching. My philosophy is there isn't one way. There's like, if you mix it up, hopefully you can get the best out of a bunch of different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to brag on you a little bit. Like you were one of the most popular teachers at your school the whole time you were teaching in public school. And you did an amazing job of existing within an institution full of people in power who frustrated you, but focusing on your kids and focusing on the real value that you were there to add to those kids' lives, and not, I think you were probably a lifesaver to probably thousands of kids over the course of your career.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I cared about them and they knew it. And it wasn't, and I respected them and they knew it. And those are the two major components that you need to work with kids, and it doesn't matter what age, but especially teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I made
special part for teenagers.
Yeah, totally. I mean, being a teenager is really, really hard. And like, I can only imagine now, I just think it's harder and harder these days. It's like, there's some benefits, right? Like you get Spotify, so you can have access to all the world's music for like less than a CD per month, right? So it's like Columbia Music House, whatever that service was before, but like now just all in your phone and an app. And so that's nice. And going on YouTube and learning anything you want is pretty awesome. But like everything else that comes with having the internet and being a teenager, like all the online bullying and comparison and even just screen time straight up is just not great. And I think is really, it's like a generation that is here to save us that is also, I think, right now in crisis. And so it's, anyway, you're out there, if you're a teenager, I love you. This is hard. You can do it. Okay, so.
I had students who, this was, Grant and I retired 5 years ago, and I was in that special program. That special program was for students who experienced trauma. And I had students that literally came in who were catatonic, rocking, couldn't focus on anything. And that was from bullying and Snapchat and all those horrific ones where they really did these horrible gang up things on vulnerable kids. And I got to work with the kids and help bring them back. But yeah, don't get me started. But yes, I saw it 5 years ago. I saw it 9 years ago. So yeah, it's a real issue, and it really needs, I don't know how, but it really needs to be, the culture about it needs to change in order for it to change.
Yeah, I think, and I want to say this, like, I think I see the culture starting to change. Partially, I see the institutions who host these social media platforms taking more responsibility. Obviously, like too little too late for the past many, many years, but like to see now, like they're just starting to make some changes. Like on Instagram, you can block people now. And it used to be, I spent an entire day once, like not that long ago, blocking someone who kept popping up from other accounts. Like it was like, it was triggering. It was difficult. It distracted me from the real work I'm here to do. And just because someone decided to spend their time harassing me. And now Instagram has changed it. So if you block someone, you can choose to block any other accounts they create. So that way it just like, that in and of itself can save me hours. Right. And that's me. Like I'm a grown-up with a lot of skills and a therapist. And like, these are kids who like don't necessarily have those skills. I think one of the most crucial things we can teach kids is how to manage their attention. Because like, I think a lot of us get caught up in like, I have to know what everyone's saying, and you don't. If it's not said directly to you, it remains unsaid. And if someone doesn't even have the courage to write an email directly to you and they're just talking about you on the internet, it's not your business. That's their small thinking, and they're not creating anything of worthiness for the world.
Yeah, it's not worth your time.
It's not worth your time. Of course, that's always easier said than done. But hopefully, people understand the value of their attention. That's what all of these corporations are vying for. Your attention. It's something you have control over, and they don't, but they want to have control over it. So they're going to keep tricking you so that you get addicted to their apps and their things.
Yeah.
Wild. So you were obviously, so did you want to be a teacher before you dealt with all of the bullshit you dealt with, like raising me, going to public school?
Yes.
Okay. So you kind of like had low key in your mind, like, this is what I want to do. And yet you're showing up to schools where I'm being treated unfairly and having to deal with like teachers and administrators and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was before I became a teacher.
Yeah.
And then it would also, there's a funny story about when I became a teacher, and you had a teacher that didn't know I was a teacher and tried to bully me. But yeah, it was, you were, second, third grade was when we freshly moved to Castro Valley.
Yeah.
And Castro Valley is a very suburban suburb. And I think your listeners have heard about Castro Valley for a while. Anyway.
I like to call Castro Valley just like every other suburb, because it's like in the Bay Area where it could be like really fun and liberal, but it's not. It's just like every other suburb. It's like kind of conservative and obnoxious. Okay, keep going.
Well, I wouldn't make that kind of a generalization. The eastern side of it is your tract homes and your conservative, everybody has to have this image.
Mm-hmm.
And the western side of it is more Berkeley-esque, hence we lived on the western side of it. But what happened, you had a teacher that gave me Weight Watcher material and stuff like that, told me about how I must not be feeding you well, appropriately thought that, we ate out of fast foods every night, which, we didn't. And
couldn't afford it.
No, we couldn't afford it. But even then, it just, it was just the assumption that we couldn't handle it. And then there was a group of boys that started teasing you, and so I went to the principal. You told me about it. I went to the principal, and the principal said, "Oh, just teach her to laugh them off, make a joke about it, blah, blah, blah." And I told the principal, I'll be darned if I'm going to have my daughter be someone that just has to laugh off these horrendous hurts. You need to stop it in the beginning. Stop it where it starts. And she just couldn't attach to that it's natural for boys to treat young girls like that. It's natural for men to say not inappropriate things to women at that time. It's all part of that kind of thinking. Boys will be boys, men will be men, and women learn how to work around it. And that was the thinking then. So that's when you had some therapy, because they were chasing you home, throwing rocks at you. But you also had a friend, a girlfriend with that was heavy set too. What's her name?
Michelle. I think her name was Michelle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was great. You guys had a good friendship and stuff like that. So
you helped me get fat community.
Well, you got your fat community. You that kind of gelled all on your own.
But you would drive me over and drop me off and stuff and facilitate that for me. Which
was
really nice.
Yeah. Well, she was a nice girl.
Yeah.
And let's see, can I think of any others? Well, I have a mama bear part of me. When somebody messes with you, I really do. And I just see red, and I'll go for the juggler. Anyway, I'm not violent, but I will make my point known.
So my mom has a Sagittarius moon and a Leo rising, and she's a Cancer sun. For anyone out there who speaks astrology, like that is definitely like flash anger, highly sensitive energy. So it makes sense. And I'm your kid, so.
Yeah. So yeah, well, and it's just a mama bear, and anybody, there's a mama bear there. And so you would see me go after a while, you started not telling me about anything that happened to you, because you didn't want any drama. You didn't want anything to come back at you. You want to just lay low, be invisible, and not have that deal with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't help what I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's reality. The teacher you had, okay, so here you were, you had 4.0 in 8th grade, and you were this really bright kid, and you're in freshman now in high school. I'm a teacher now. And, oh, I know, when you had multiplication, well, this is just a teacher story. It didn't have to do with weight and stuff. You're kind of like me in the sense that if you're doing rote things again, again, and again, and again, it is boring and your mind tends to wander. This happens for me too. So you're in 2nd or 3rd grade and you're doing multiplication, these great big old awful multiplication pages, and you're having a rough time with it. And I asked her, could she mix it up and put some division in there just so that your mind is doing something else? Because then you could get through that page in the time limit. They were doing time limits on you, which is crap, which is absolute crap. But I didn't, that's before I became a teacher, and I didn't know officially that that was crap. I just had the intuitive sense that it was crap. Anyway, and asked her, you know, if she would put it in there. When she balked at me because she said, well, this is not how we do it, blah, blah, blah. But when she actually did it, your time was like almost half of what the other time was. And it wasn't that you couldn't do it fast. And it wasn't that you didn't understand how to do it. It's just the repetitive nature of it was incredibly boring and your mind would wander.
Mhm.
You know, so that's essentially that. So it's kind of bucking that system of doing that. Back to another teacher you had, and then, yeah, the big one when you were a senior, but when you were a freshman and they put you in a group and you were with three F students and you were the 1A student.
Hmm.
And the guy insisted you were going to work there and you couldn't win because if you had done everything yourself, then you get an F because you did everything. But if you waited for the other kids weren't going to do the work because they don't care.
Mhm.
So you came to me on that one. And so I went to see the guy and the guy said, well, you wouldn't understand this little lady. He's a great big, tall, 6-foot guy. You wouldn't understand this little lady. It's called cooperative learning. Well, at that time, I was teaching how to do cooperative learning in the County Office of Education. But he didn't know who I was and what I did or anything. He just, so and I said, excuse me. He said, oh, you're a teacher, elementary? He just assumed I taught elementary and I taught high school.
Mhm.
And anyway, so he finally acquiesced and changed. He said it's going to change the situation and you did okay. But he got like within 5 inches of me face to face. And I just stood there, you know, I didn't back down. And so then because once he found out that, yes, I taught it, yes, I knew what I was talking about, and that I knew he didn't know what he was talking about,
Mhm.
that he was going to work it out so that you weren't going to get an F no matter what. So that was another one of your teaching things. The other one was when you're a junior going into a senior, they didn't allow you in I believe it's AP history.
It was sophomore going into junior. I remember it very well.
Sophomore going into junior, they wouldn't allow you, and they wouldn't tell you why.
Mhm.
And I knew your scores because you had to test everything in Castro Valley. I knew your scores were higher than some of the kids left in there. I knew your grades were higher than some of the kids left in there. So I couldn't figure out, and you couldn't figure out why it wasn't there. So I had contacted the principal a number of times, never responded back. So finally, the leadership teacher responded to me, said, well, hey, Marianne, you know me, blah, blah, blah. You know, what's the issue here? Da, da, da. And I said, I want to look through her file because she is not allowed in this class. And I want to know why. And oh, no one lasts to look through the CUME file. And finally, it was like 3 months in, I finally get a meeting with the principal. And oh, we'll let her in right now, blah, blah, blah. It come to find out it was a teacher's opinion on whether you should be in that AP class.
Mhm.
Just a teacher's opinion. And this was a teacher you liked, which was interesting.
It was really interesting to find that out, actually.
Yeah, it's a teacher's opinion, which is so illegal. If you of all these objective things, you make it and you surpass the other scores, and then some teacher has an opinion, can keep you out of an advanced placement class, that is just so no. So they were like, oh, we're changing this, it's never going to happen again, and we're so sorry, because there was a good lawsuit there.
A huge lawsuit there.
Yeah.
You know, here's something that I think about a lot, actually, of a regret I have is I never went into that AP history class, even after you advocated for me, and what I should have done is dropped honors chemistry because that was going to take my GPA. We had a terrible book. I already knew that I hated the class. And I just was so afraid of the social dynamic of jumping into a class mid-semester that I didn't go through. This is what I preach now is get uncomfortable, do the awkward thing so you can go where you're meant to go. Because I would have excelled at AP history. I did not excel at honors chemistry. I hated it. And I was just letting like social fear get in the way. Cause at that point, like, you know, I recognized and realized how unfair it was that I was out of that class, but like, I didn't want to disrupt, you know, whatever. And who cares, right? People disrupt all the time. And it's just, you got to do what's right for you. So anyway, I'm grateful to you for all that you did, including paying, like, we did not have money for this, but you paid a lawyer to write a letter on your behalf in order to get that principal.
I did.
So I'm grateful to you for all that advocacy. I remember in 5th grade, I got in trouble for book reports or something. And my terrible 5th grade teacher told you it was because I was fat.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. He was quite full of himself, and he taught this, you know, he had been teaching in the school forever. And so he taught everybody's older brother and sister, and he knew all these families and all that. Well, it should be like that. And you knew darn well that the parents wrote that report, that kid didn't write the report. And it was just, yeah, he was a jerk.
I remember a lot about 5th grade was really hard, especially like, I think about this a lot too. I was doing, you know, the presidential physical fitness test, right? As a fat kid, it's just designed to make fat kids feel bad. And it's like, and it's not designed to actually promote a love of movement, which is what this kind of stuff just made me hate moving, which is so sad because movement is something our bodies essentially need. And so I remember like doing the mile, and we had to run, and they would they wouldn't let me finish, right? Like because I didn't finish with everybody else, like all the little skinny kids, like they never let me finish. They would always like close up the mile early, which was kind of fun because then like I got to be lazy, but like it never forced me to actually finish and see what it was like to move for a mile. And like, you know what I mean? Just little things like that where like I was just constantly othered because of my ability. And I really genuinely appreciate environments now where the belonging is inherent and no one is too slow. Like fat girls hiking, for example, like the main rule is we go as slow as the slowest person in the group, which is actually really wonderful for mindfulness and for noticing. Like if you're just like hustling, you're not stopping to pay attention to like the beauty of the outside around you and get that healing too. And I wish I could go back and make all the PE for all the fat kids, just so they can learn to enjoy movement and stick it out, you know, and finish something.
Well, teach body positive.
Yeah, exactly. Or body neutrality, you know what I mean? Because all bodies are good bodies and everyone is affected by fat phobia. And I remember something that, this is ironic too, because I think my dad's mom, Grammy, would give you a hard time about my weight as though it was your fault that I was fat. And I'll say, just in terms of her caretaking of me, I would say it's more her fault. If there's a fault to point to, you know what I mean? Like to where I needed food for comfort. So I'm curious, like how you dealt with that when like your ex-mother-in-law is giving you a hard time about raising your daughter.
Well, I didn't really, after I got, you came back, I didn't really pay much attention to her, because when you told me that she was violent with you, I really didn't want anything to do with her.
Oh, good. I didn't realize I told you.
Yeah, you did. You told me, you came back and you said, I love Grammy, but I don't like her very much. And is that okay? And you were very upset about it. And I said, yes, that's perfectly okay. And then eventually you told me, yeah, that she would take the stick to you.
She once punished me. So she beat me so hard with a wooden spoon that she broke it. And then she punished me for breaking her wooden spoon. which is like, I mean, I just see it and I see how broken she must have been to treat a 4-year-old girl that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like how terrible grown-ups must have been to her. I mean, she grew up in parochial boarding schools too, so I'm sure the nuns were violent with her. She doesn't make it right, but it does make it easier to understand and easier to heal from.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild. Well, I'm grateful to you for all the advocacy that you did for me as a kid. Like it must have felt, what did it feel like? Like going up like against the system and the machine and like constantly having like barrier after barrier.
It was frustrating. It hurts as a parent because you see the beauty and the potential of your child, and you see just that. I mean, it's an ism, it's something that people of color experience absolutely every day. People, it's that's just, it's something that makes you stronger, and it hurts you, and it opens your eyes to that stagnant, horrible, self-absorbed thinking.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful to you for everything you did to help me become the person I am today, and to navigate me through all those systems and all that crappy, unfair stuff. And grateful also that you work so hard. I remember watching you just like aiming for your degree and just relentlessly pursuing it, even after like you had to stop semesters because babysitters would flake out and stuff like that. And just seeing you keep going, even though you kept stumbling, and then become a teacher yourself, and then advocate for those kids, and like really put yourself and be in a district where you had the at-risk kids and you had a lot of input in their lives and were able to kind of be an ally to them in those unfair systems.
Yeah. Because I knew what it was like to be, I experienced it through you. I experienced it personally. So I knew what it's like to be unheard, unappreciated, and, not fitting the thing. And so it was a passion, and I got to work my passion, which was such a gift. I mean, there are some parts, that would have been nice to be able to create art pieces and all of that stuff. Life didn't, I did a major that I couldn't stand, which was business administration. I couldn't stand it. Everything's maximize, minimize this, maximize profit, had absolutely no caring in it at all. It is about the corporation. But I learned how things worked, and it gave me some mindsets that have helped me. But thankfully, even with that major, I was able to.
I don't know what you mean by, but I learned how things work, and I gave you some mindsets that have helped me.
Shut down, Siri. Good old Apple Watch.
Yeah.
But so to be able to take what I have and use the strengths that I have to and find my passion within what I have, that was quite a gift. I mean, so it's in that whole thing where you create the heaven you live in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all part of that. Yes, there were things like there was some really horrible administration. My department chair was awful. But if I don't look at what I can't control and look at what I can create and make that's good, then that's what you do. You make the best, and you make the heaven that you live in.
Mm. Yeah, heaven's here on earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to wait. Thank you so much, Mom. I love you so much.
Love you.
Yay. I'm glad you were born. I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad you immigrated from Canada, even though I like living really close to Canada.
Yeah, well, I didn't really have a choice on that. That was
fair enough.
But I do have a choice about living here.
Yeah.
And it was great that you're living here too.
Yeah. Yay.
We really have it in a beautiful place, and get to be close to each other. That's pretty darn good.
It's a great gift. I really don't take it for granted at all. So I love you.
Love you.